What's going on, everybody? Happy Saturday. Like always, running about 2 minutes early. Got to give you guys that awesome sip of coffee there. So we'll give everybody a couple minutes here to roll in, and then we're going to talk about, is white-collar crime more serious than rape and murder? Hey, what's going on there? Good afternoon. Found a really cool article on the topic that we're talking about today. I don't know if it's a cool article, interesting article, and it was pretty recent, June 5th of this year. Wild Games. Hey, what's going on there, Wild Games? I'm not sure if I recognize your name, so I'm wondering if maybe you're new. Hey, Tamara. Howdy. Tamara's she's in cowboy mood. I picture Tamara sitting there with a cowboy hat on. First time catching the stream. Oh, awesome. Well, I'm glad you could join, Wild Games. Hopefully you've, I imagine you subscribed. That's probably how you got the notification. Juan Carlos. Did I respond to a text yesterday? Or are you being facetious? Hey, was it Sheila Johnson? Juan, what did you text me yesterday? I don't see a text here from you. July 7th, July 6th. If you can retext it, Juan, that would be awesome. I don't see a text that came in here from you yesterday. And I apologize, guys, if I've been getting back to you guys a little bit slow the last couple days. My kids just got in a night and a half ago. They're here for a little bit of summer vacation. And they're not kids anymore. They're like adults. They're like mini people. Doing country service. Gotta go. I think you mean community service. Is it weird finding prison interesting? Not really. I imagine it's kind of a taboo subject out there in the real world, so I think it's probably interesting. But Juan, if you can retext me whatever it was that you sent me yesterday, I don't see a message from you. How many months did that guy that got 1,000 hours of community... Oh, Todd? Oh, geez. I think he put in about 4 months of community service, Juan, and I can go back and look at my notes to see when Todd and I first spoke, which I believe was about 4 or 5 months before he got sentenced, maybe 6 months. I would say 4 to 6 months, but I'll double check it for you. And if you want, you and I can chat a little bit later today. Shoot me a text when you're finishing up with your community service today, and we'll chat a little bit then. All right, guys, so let's kick this off. It is now, it's actually a little bit past 2, so we're going to kick this off. Give me 1 second here. All right, so I apologize if the sound on that intro doesn't sound right on the live stream. I don't know why. It might have something to do with the way it plays. I'm not sure, because it sounds fine on my end, but when I watch later on, after it records, it seems like it's choppy. So my bad. I get out of NA at 8 p.m. Eastern. Okay, so let's talk then for a few minutes, Juan. Tonight's going to be I don't got anything going on crazy tonight. I'm going out to dinner with the kids. That's about it. And then I'll be a little bit MIA for Sunday and a portion of Monday. So guys, we're talking about white-collar crime is more serious than rape and murder. Now, those of us that have gotten in trouble for white collar crime are clearly going to not agree with that statement. However, I was reading some articles, and actually it was Tamara has sent me an article on inmates. I forgot the title of it, but ex-cons make really good employees. So from reading that article, it just got me reading, and you know how your mind goes. You watch one video or you read one article, and before you know it, you're into a whole slew of different articles that have nothing to do with what you originally read. So I came across an article today from a guy named Steven Elliott. He posts stuff over at legalbeagle.com, and in the description to this video, I put the link to the article that we're going to talk about. So in his article, he starts off with white-collar crimes are estimated to cost society many times more than crimes such as robbery and burglary. The amount of death caused by corporate mishap, such as inadequate pharmaceutical testing, far outnumbers those caused by murder. White-collar crime is relatively unstudied and not well understood. As a result, white-collar criminals are able to slip through the cracks with massive profits and minor punishment. Understanding what motivates these crimes of greed should be the first step in understanding how to prevent them. So a lot of you are potentially going into prison for different types of white collar crimes, whether it be Medicare fraud, whether it be mortgage fraud, whether it be embezzlement, tax fraud, all kinds of different little ventures off of what white collar crime could be. So it's interesting to talk a little bit and read a little bit of what causes some people to make that detour in life to start committing these type of crimes. So to me, this is an interesting topic, and let's just kind of go through a little bit of this here on what I pulled up, and then we can discuss it and kind of see where your guys' frame of mind is, whether you agree, disagree, because not everybody in here is white collar. There's some people in here that just, first-time offenders, nonviolent drug offenders, so maybe you have an opposing view, an agreeing view. So this isn't necessarily my views. I'm very interested to hear what you guys think about this. So white-collar crime was first defined by Edward Sutherland in 1949. Since then, criminologists have come to accept white-collar crime is as damaging, if not more so, than street crime such as robbery, burglary, arson, and murder. Sutherland explained white-collar crime through differential association, a theory of crime that had major impacts on the entire field. Differential association explains that criminal behavior is learned behavior. Since that time, a handful of new theories have been applied to these crimes. So that's a little bit of the history of where the term white-collar criminal, where the white-collar crime, where it originated, who's the one that coined the phrase, the theory and speculation. The rational choice theory has become one of the most used explanations for white-collar crime. Rational choice states that humans will weigh the pros and the cons of a behavior and then act in their self-interest. In the context of white-collar crime, an individual would compare the outcome of committing a crime compared to the outcome of not committing a crime. If the compensation of a crime has an outcome with more positive than negative effects, the individual will commit the crime. Theorists argue that the perspective does not account for socialist influences and individual differences. For example, some offenders could be predispositioned to crime because of their genetic makeup. So the way you were brought up, the neighborhood you grew up in, habits you learned, maybe stuff from your parents, stuff from other siblings. So there's all kinds of reasons on what could cause us to potentially commit these type of white-collar crimes. But the fact that they're calling it a rational choice theory, basically, we talk a lot in a lot of these videos on irrational and rational thought process. So my first discrepancy with this is that they're calling it a rational decision. The problem is a lot of us, including myself, specifically myself, prior to everything that I've gone through, and I'm still making progress every day. So by no means am I, fixed of all of my wrongdoing or my errors. But what I used to think was rational thinking that used to allow me to make a lot of the decisions that had devastating consequences in my life was because my rational thinking was really completely irrational. I just was not able to identify it as irrational. And to me, it felt rational. So that's a big part of the problem is if we're thinking that we're making rational choices and they're not rational at all, because clearly to decide to break the law, decide to hurt somebody, decide to make shady decisions, clearly that is not a rational thought process. We find ways to rationalize our choices and our decisions and our actions, but that doesn't make it rational. So when you can get to identify and actually see it for what it is and start focusing on your thought process and questioning yourself and having somebody else maybe look at it and getting their input, and you start to see that these thought patterns are really irrational. And once you can label them as irrational, it makes it a little easier to not make those same type of decisions, because now you're being honest with yourself and you're no longer lying to yourself, and you're telling yourself that, hey, this is definitely an irrational thought, and this is the type of thinking that landed me in this situation to begin with. So it's time to start challenging. It doesn't mean you're going to fix it overnight, but it's time to start challenging our thought process of irrational thinking and decision making, and not acting so fast, maybe not acting impulsively, and taking a minute to really weigh out what possible outcome could come from this, good or bad. And if a possible outcome could ever be, prison, getting hurt, that should be such a devastating outcome that there really should be nothing that is going to outweigh that with, I'm still going to do it. There should be no amount of money, no amount of success, no amount of notoriety that is going to make us do something that potentially could hurt others, land us in prison, something in that realm, that we somehow still make these decisions thinking, well, it's never going to happen to me. I'm not going to get caught. The reason why this guy got caught was because he made this fatal mistake. Well, once you think you've got the system beat, that's definitely when it's going to get you. So if you're one of those people out there that's watching this video and thinking that you've got all the answers and that you found a way to beat the system, trust me, you're not going to beat the system. You might beat it today, you might beat it tomorrow, you might beat it for the next year, but eventually when it does come tumbling down, it's going to come tumbling down, and it's going to be so heavy that it's going to bury you. And then you're going to go into victim mode, saying it's not fair, they took advantage. That's when we stop taking accountability. We take all the accountability for our success. We take that was me, I did it. I've got this awesome family, I've got this awesome house, I've got these awesome cars, I've got all this money in the bank, I've got these awesome toys. We'll gladly brag about that stuff. But when shit hits the fan, and we get in trouble for poor decisions that we made, it was somebody else's fault. Somebody told on me. The feds are out to get me. They're making a big deal out of this, and everybody does it. There's a million ways to justify actions. But at the end of the day, you got to look in that mirror when no one else is looking, no one else is paying attention to what you're doing, and you've got to wonder to yourself, what the fuck is wrong with me? Because if you don't challenge your thoughts, and you just think you have all the answers, and you're trying to help other people, and you're trying to give other people you're trying to give them information to help their own lives. Meanwhile, your life's in shambles. It's a lie. It's deceitful. You're living this fairy tale, soap opera type of a life where you're acting one way in front of everybody, and then another way, when you're in private. It's like the man behind the mask. If you can't be somebody in public without a mask on, then you've got to really second guess and question yourself. And it was such a challenge for me. You guys have no idea. Maybe you do. Maybe some of you do relate to what I'm talking about. But some of you, because you see me on YouTube, so this is the only time you really get to see me. You don't get to see me in my real life, and the daily struggles that I deal with. But I don't allow it to consume me the way that it used to consume me. I try not to dwell on negative thoughts and stuff that's no longer in my control. And I have to realize that I can't just tell somebody that and expect them to all of a sudden understand and fix their own life, because it was an intense process for me that required me going to prison and going through a 10-month residential drug addiction program that as you guys know that have been watching the videos, that drug program does not have to do much about drugs as it does cognitive skills and challenging your thought process and rethinking what you think you know and realizing that you don't know shit and letting yourself break down and communicate with others and be vulnerable. For a lot of us, being vulnerable is probably one of the hardest things. Struggling with humility, being vulnerable, and egos. When you're egotistical and you don't like feeling humiliated, you don't like people correcting you, you don't like people challenging you, you feel like you always got to be right, you really got to question yourself and ask yourself, are these things that you struggle with? And don't lie to yourself, because you're not doing anybody any good. You're not doing yourself any good. You're only potentially hurting yourself. And we've always heard that as kids. Just tell the truth, because when you're lying, you're not hurting anybody else but yourself. All of these tools and techniques that are out there to help us, especially what you learn in RDAP, this isn't reinventing a wheel. This was all stuff that we've heard before. But RDAP has found a way to break it down and put it into a program, and where they teach it to you, reteach it to you over a 9, 10, 11, 12-month period of time, however long it takes you to finish RDAP. They reteach you these tools in this process to where it has new meaning, and you start to identify and actually use the tools and identify where your weaknesses are. And it's not an easy process, guys. So nobody's expecting anybody to get fixed overnight. So that was a little bit about theories and speculation. So let's talk about types. Types of white-collar criminal include Medicare fraud, tax evasion, mortgage fraud, wire fraud, embezzlement, overprescribing pain medications for non-medical purpose, plus, obviously many, many more. There's a whole bunch listed. Fraud occurs when an individual or corporation is inherently deceived for profit. A company may misrepresent products or use misleading advertisement to increase sales. These crimes are combined with, once again, the intention of increasing profits. So what's preventions and solutions? Okay. Financial incentives drive most white-collar crime, but the fact that not everyone chooses to violate the law must be considered. What stops people from breaching society's moral codes for profit? So what stops somebody, like, say you and I are both doctors. Why am I deciding to overprescribe patients for money, knowing it's for non-medical purposes, versus you're deciding ethics are more important than profit? So what's allowing me to cross that line, and what's keeping you on the other side of the line? Both of us are making good money. Whether I decide to break the law or not break the law, as a doctor, student loans and all that stuff, but at the end of the day, you're making a comfortable living. You can raise a family, you can purchase a home, you can have vehicles. If you know how to budget your money even a little bit, a doctor's salary can go a long ways. So what's causing that doctor to become so greedy that he now goes from the bright side to the dark side, and he goes after all these massive profits when he was already doing really wealthy? What causes that greed for some but not others? Because not everybody makes that decision. So that makes it interesting. Some theorists argue that strong social bonds and community involvement with strong moral convictions reduce the likelihood of criminal activity. So if you're the type of person that is, maybe you were raised in a family that was all about community, and maybe whether that be going to church or going to different events, giving back to your community, identifying the struggles in the world and what people are going through, and realizing how good you may have it, that may stop you from crossing the line and breaking these codes of ethic where you decide to allow greed to kick in, because you're satisfied and you're happy with what you have. You're content with, hey, maybe I'm not a gazillionaire, but I'm not broke, I'm not hurting, I've got a nice home, I've got a nice car, I've got a great family, and I don't have to look over my shoulder, and I can sleep well at night. Versus the guy that makes that poor decision, crosses over that line, there's an ill feeling deep down inside, but that money starts coming in, starts adjusting the lifestyle. His family may not know, maybe they know, maybe they don't know. Colleagues may or may not know, but now you're providing this additional lifestyle that maybe your already really good salary is not going to no longer cover, because now you're above and beyond what that salary would have brought you in. So now you've got to maintain this facade. And the only way you can do that is by continuing to commit more fraud, break more laws. And you start justifying it more and more and more. I got to take care of my family. Well, your family doesn't need a $2 million home. Your wife doesn't need a $100,000 car, or your husband. I'm not saying women aren't going to be the providers. Don't want to sound sexist there. Your kids don't need $30,000 brand new cars for their first cars. They don't need credit cards to go out and be able to spend all kinds of money. So where do wants and needs separate? We all know what needs are, or at least we should. We need air, we need clothing, we need food, we need love, or at least we crave it. Wants, we want things. Everybody wants things, but what are you doing? What are you willing to do to get those wants? If you want a brand new house, are you willing to work the required amount of time that it's going to need to get this brand new house? Or are you like, hey, if I just bend the rules a little bit, dive into this gray area, start selling some pills under the table, or embezzling whatever your white collar crime potentially was, or your regular crime. This isn't just for white collar crimes, but whatever you decided to do to bend the rules to suit your pocket. Those are wants, and wants and needs get very, very clouded. People start confusing their needs for their wants. And before you know it, you think you need these things, and you don't. You don't. At the end of the day, when you really ask yourself, for those of you that are facing federal prison right now and you're getting ready to go to prison, if you could go change everything that you did that got you into this point, you would immediately do it, because I think it's all fair. It's fair for almost all of us to say it's not worth it. What I'm going through right now is the worst thing I've ever gone through. I would gladly give it all back. I'd move to a smaller house, get a smaller car, tell my wife no, tell my kids no, tell my husband no. Saying yes to give them what they want isn't doing anybody any good. So we've got these issues to where we start a justification process to where it makes everything really tough to make these right decisions, because now we've gotten ourselves into this shitstorm and we don't know how to get out of it. According to the theory, a family-owned business with strong beliefs against crime would be unlikely to engage in white-collar crime. On the other hand, a company consisting of weak social connections and a goal of profit at all costs would be likely to engage in criminal behavior. Like, there you go again. So if you worked from the ground up, you built your family business, you're happy with that, the neighborhood knows who you are, you're satisfied. But a lot of these guys, a lot of these women, they get into the corporate world. It's almost a regular day in the park for how some business is conducted. A lot of the stuff that we've got in trouble for has been the practice amongst different companies for years. It's almost written in their handbook, but they find ways to skirt the law, find ways to get out of it, and maybe white collar crime does go undetected in a lot of situations. I'm yet still on the fence on that one. So prevention. Evidence shows that white-collar criminals are sometimes given preferential treatment in the legal system. If a white-collar criminal is tried for his or her offense, which rarely happens, the prison sentences are short, the fines are trivial, the lack of punishment could motivate further criminal activity. So, for a lot of white-collar criminals that are caught, skimming millions of dollars, putting out horrible pills onto the street that is just going into low-level drug dealers' hands that are passing them on to kids in the neighborhood. People are dying, overdosing, and finally, eventually, it catches up with us. We get a sentence, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is. But somebody else that's on the street, that is, selling, the dealer, the crack dealer, the meth dealer, directly gets in. Sometimes life in prison, 20 years, 10-year minimums, 20-year minimums. When they were getting a lot of these drugs and these pills and the prescriptions, they were getting it from the higher up on the food chain, but the higher up on the food chain has much less of a consequence. And in a lot of cases, they don't even know a consequence exists because it's not an everyday occurrence. It is becoming more and more normal to hear of these white-collar criminals, getting heavier sentences. But for a long time, I think it was It was like, hey, the white collar criminal felt like they had a free pass, and of course we don't identify ourselves as criminals. Maybe now we do, but then we just identified ourselves as this is what everybody else is doing to make their money. So if I'm going to compete in this white collar world, I got to be willing to bend some morals and break some ethics to move forward. So it's a scary world to want to live in. Cracking down on white collar criminals could reduce the problem. If theorists are correct and white collar crime is a rational choice, the fear of apprehension would play a role in the decision-making process. Without fear of consequences, white collar criminals see few disadvantages to committing illegal acts. So if there's no severe consequences because everybody in the industry that you came from has been doing the same stuff that you've been doing, you have no fear of doing it because maybe they've been doing it 5 years, 10 years, and they're making a lot of money, and that they've broken some rules, bent some rules, and found a way to justify it by saying everyone else is doing it. That's exactly the situation I found myself in going into the pain clinic. I was like, well, these people are going to get them from somewhere, where the doctor's the one writing the prescriptions. I found all kinds of ways to take myself out of the scope of blame. And at the end of the day, when the shit rolled downhill and I got caught right in that storm and got looking at prison time, and originally, I was looking at a lengthy sentence. I was looking at 15 years possibly. There was nothing that I had did that I felt was worth that risk. I immediately regretted all decisions. And if those consequences would have been more prevalent up front, like, hey, if you go work at this place, there's a high chance you're going to prison. I never would have taken the job. Never would have looked at it. Wouldn't even have been on my radar at all. But because I was able to justify and make excuses and say, well, we're not like this other company because we're not doing this. Like, find ways to sell myself, which doesn't do any good because I sure as hell couldn't sell the marshals. I sure as hell couldn't sell the DEA when they came in. I couldn't sell the narcotics division that made the original arrest. There was no selling anybody on anything other than trying to tell myself that now I'm a victim and now the federal government's taking advantage of me because I can't afford to buy my way out of this. They're going to slam the gates on me and they're going to send me off to prison. And I'm a good person. Well, we talk about this. Good people make bad decisions and go to prison every single day. That's why it's so important that it'd be great if you could catch this thought process before. Maybe some of you are watching this and you're not in indictment yet. Maybe some of you are in a white collar type of an environment, or you're in an environment where you're making some poor choices, but it hasn't caught up to you yet. Maybe you're watching this video right now and saying, shit, this could very well happen to me. We met a lady. We were at the hot tub a couple weeks ago, and as I told you guys, my girlfriend opened up a hair salon, and I was just talking to the lady. She just happened to say, hey, I looking for a new, I don't know how the topic came up on hair, but the lady, whoever used to cut her hair, disappeared. And so we started talking and, asking what we do for a living. And I told her about my YouTube channel and, my whole past, the pain clinic. She goes, oh, I work for a pain clinic. And I'm just like, wow, you work for a pain clinic? She's like, yeah. She's like, but we don't do that and we don't do this. And it's like, okay, do you write other prescriptions? Well, mostly pain prescriptions. So if the feds want to come in and make an example, they will. But she was in justification mode, and she's the office manager, same role I had. So I explained to her, I was like, look, I had the same thought pattern you did. I was the office manager. I thought there was no risk I was taking. I went to prison, and I had to fight to get the plea that I got. But can't tell her anything, and I get it. You probably couldn't have told me anything then either because of the kind of money that was being offered and the potential income that could have been made from it jades and clouds everything else to where you don't want to not have that opportunity, because we all live in this world that we have to feel like we're comparing and competing with the guy next door. And we've got, you got this car, I've got this car. Your bank account looks like this. Your investment portfolio looks like this. We want to be able to compete, but at what cause, to what extent, to what justification, to what consequence? If we don't focus on those things now, and those of us that are facing prison, getting ready to go to prison now, Just because you're already going, you still have to challenge your thoughts and still have to change your thinking and still have to take yourself out of the victim role and place yourself into accountable. I did it. I did this to myself. No matter what type of sentence that you get, whether you feel the sentence is fair or unfair, and they're giving too lengthy of a sentence, okay. But this is what happens. We know we live in a country that over-sentences people, locking up too many people. That doesn't mean that you and I didn't deserve to get locked up. Just because they're sentencing too many people, don't necessarily lump your sum into, well, I shouldn't be sentenced. Most of us made enough mistakes that we probably never got caught for. Enough bad choices that we never got caught for. Most people don't get caught on their first issue. Not to say it doesn't happen, but most of us that have been caught have been making these decisions over and over and over again to the point where it doesn't even feel like we're doing anything wrong any longer. So challenging your thoughts, challenging your beliefs, challenging what it is you want, being content. Just because your neighbor has something that you want doesn't mean you have to outdo them. You don't need to compete. You shouldn't be basing your life on accumulating things, assets. You should be accumulating love, happiness, being okay where you are, caring about your family. These are the things that get underrated. And people say how much they care about their family, but yet they're out there making all of these poor decisions. People say, I would never do anything to hurt my family. I would never do anything to hurt my children. Yet you're going to prison, probably hurting your children more than you can ever imagine. Something I have to live with. For every day of my life, I have to live with the fact that I took myself away from my family, from my children, because of stupid decisions that mean nothing now, other than I appreciate what I have now, and I realize I can't go back and fix what I did. I can't get that time back that I lost with my children. Can't do it. It's never going to be how it was prior to me going into prison. That bond forever will be a little bit stretched out, and you can try to repair, but the mistakes that we make, we have to live with for the rest of our lives. And nobody did this to us but ourselves. So that's, if you guys are interested in reading more about this article, it's in the description of this video. Let's see here. I think I posted it in here. I'll give it to you guys in here as well. There you go. Johnny 5 checking in. What's up, John? Do you take back your state when you're released from prison? So Michael B is asking, when you get released from prison, do you have to go back to the state that your crime was in? Not necessarily. Like, my crime was in Georgia. Before I got sentenced, I moved back to Florida with permission. So they they transferred my probation from Georgia to Florida. And then I went to prison in Florida. And while I was in prison, I changed my release address to Washington State. So I was released directly, but before they could verify my address, probation in Washington had to be willing to accept me on probation, which typically will get approved. Once that was approved, that was my release address, and the BOP transferred me from Florida to Washington. So you can go pretty much wherever. I think you just have to have a place to live, a reason why you're transferring out. But it's not rocket science. Does it answer your question there, Michael B? So I've got my children here. We're just kind of hanging out. One daughter's in the shower. The other daughter's out checking her phone, doing stuff. So we're probably gonna go get some lunch. Monday, we're gonna go hit the river. We're gonna go river rafting on Monday, which I'm a little bit scared. So I'm sure the kids, I'm not going to tell them how scary it is. It's like, I don't want to say white water rafting, but for me, I wouldn't know the difference because I've never been any kind of rafting other than floating on a raft. So we bought a bunch of cool rafts and oars and stuff like that on Amazon. So we're going to have some fun this week. My older daughter is only going to be here for a week. She leaves at the end of next week. And my younger daughter is going to be here for a total of 2 weeks. So she'll be here for, 2 weeks. So for me, it's great because I haven't seen them since November when I went up to New York to see them. And then before that, I didn't see him before like July of 2014, summer, before I went to prison. So doing what you can, and that's what you got to realize when you guys get out of prison. You can't expect everything to go back to perfect, even though I wanted it to. I really did. Like, I really wanted to pick right back up where I left off. And it's not necessarily going to work that way, especially if you're in maybe a relationship where you're separating and you're not going to be with your kids when you get out. My ex-wife lives in New York. I'm in Washington. It's about as far away from one another as you can possibly get. So I've got to be able to deal with the distance and communication, and I got to remember how old they are. 15 and 17. Their biggest priorities in the world are not picking up the phone to call me. They're teenagers. They're going through teenage stuff, boyfriends, life. Just, you guys remember what it was like. I was just telling my daughter today, I was like, man, I always say to myself, I wish I could be 15, 16, 17 years old again. And then I see what they go through as teenagers, and I don't want to be that age again. That was a really, really rough age. Even though a lot of the stuff that we look back on wasn't that serious, but in that moment in time in our life, that's the most serious thing that exists. Nothing else matters. So it's hard to sometimes relate to that because, we've grown, we've moved past that, and we realize that it's not that serious, but it's important that you remember it is to them. That's what they know. That's the world that they're in right now. So to tell them it's not that serious, you're overreacting, it's almost like you're not giving you're giving them no respect. You're downsizing how they feel. You're dismissing their feelings. You're dismissing their emotions, not giving them the validation that they need sometimes. So it's important to allow them they got to go through it. You can't just tell somebody it's not that hard, get over it, and expect them just to get over it. So just doing my best to be there as much as I can, listening, talking. When they do call, just be happy that they called and not beat them up too much for not calling me more, because then they're not going to want to call me again. It's like, oh shit, it's been 2 weeks. If we call him, he's going to yell at us. So I don't want that type of relationship. I'm just taking every day as I can, controlling on what I can control, not controlling or not focusing on what I can't control. So sorry, those topics always get me a little whiny. I'm like the whiny prison brat. How'd this guy survive in prison? Every time he does a video, he gets teary-eyed. I cried a lot in prison, I'm going to tell you that. Talking about my kids in RDAP and processing through that. There's just who I am. Waterworks, come on, can't hide it. And I learned in RDAP that it's okay. I don't need to hide it. It's just part of me. If you don't like it, get the fuck off my channel. No, I'm just kidding. I hope you stay. All right, guys, I'm going to roll out of here and go have some lunch with my Rugrats. If you guys need anything, call, text, email. Saturdays are always a little bit shorter days, so I appreciate you guys. Hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. Do something fun. If you're getting ready to go to prison soon, try not to dwell on that. Go spend some time with your family. Do what you can. Make phone calls. Try to stay in a happy place. Trust me, it's just as hard on them as it is you, so don't make it any worse. Let them know would you care. You're going to do what you can while you're in prison. Make every day count, because the free world is not a place to take for granted, and you will forget that when you get out of prison. You'll forget what prison was like, and you'll start to go back to old mentality if you don't work real hard on changing thought patterns. So anyway, guys, I'm rdapdan. Hope you guys have an amazing weekend. I love every single one of you. I will see you guys Monday. Hopefully I'll get to do something with my kids on here, so you get to have a little hearing from them as well. All right, guys. Be real. Be safe. I'm rdapdan. I'm out. Peace.